Stop for a moment, before you keep scrolling, before you multitask, before your mind jumps ahead. Pause, because something important is happening right now. Out of endless choices, infinite distractions, and countless possible moments, you landed here, not later, not earlier, now. Quantum physics tells us that observation changes reality, that the moment something is noticed, possibilities collapse into form. So ask yourself this: what if this isn't just another video? What if this is a checkpoint? Not a coincidence, not background noise, but a message reaching you at the exact moment your mind is ready to hear it. You don't need to believe anything yet. You don't need to agree. Just listen, because if you're here, something in you is already shifting. And once awareness begins, it doesn't go back to sleep. Stay with me. This wasn't random. 1. Nothing enters your awareness by chance. Pause for a moment and really think about this. Out of millions of videos, voices, messages, and distractions competing for your attention right now, this is what you're hearing. Not because an algorithm randomly decided your fate, but because your awareness was already moving in this direction before you ever clicked. Quantum physics reveals something unsettling and powerful. Reality behaves differently when it is observed. At the smallest level of existence, particles remain undefined, scattered across possibilities, until observation collapses them into a single outcome. Observation is not passive, it is participatory. It selects. The same principle operates within your mind. You don't notice everything around you. You notice what matches your internal state, your questions, your doubts, your silent searching. Awareness filters reality long before conscious choice appears. What you call coincidence is often alignment happening beneath conscious thought. This means something crucial. Your attention is not random. If you've been feeling unsettled, reflective, or quietly questioning the direction of your life, your mind has already begun shifting. And when the mind shifts, reality starts offering mirrors. Messages appear, words land differently, certain ideas feel heavier, closer, almost personal. That is not chance, that is resonance. People often say, "I just stumbled upon this." But quantum theory doesn't recognize stumbling, it recognizes interaction. Systems respond when frequencies match. When the internal signal changes, the external field reorganizes to meet it. You are not passively drifting through information. You are selecting it moment by moment through your state of awareness. And here's the part most people never realize. What enters your awareness can change the trajectory of your life, not because the message itself is magical, but because awareness is the gateway to choice. Once something is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen. The system updates. So if this message feels like it's speaking directly to you, that's because your mind is ready to receive it. Not fully comfortable yet, not fully certain, but open enough. That openness is the beginning of change. Nothing enters your awareness by chance. It arrives when the mind is prepared to listen, even if you don't yet know what to do with what you've heard. 2. Your thoughts are signals, not noise. Most people treat their thoughts as background noise, random, meaningless chatter that just happens in the mind. Quantum physics challenges that assumption in a profound way. At the deepest level of reality, nothing is truly isolated. Everything exists as interaction, vibration, and probability, and your thoughts are part of that system. A thought is not just a sentence in your head, it is an event. It carries energy, direction, and repetition. When a thought appears once, it's weak. When it repeats, it becomes a pattern, and patterns are what reality responds to. In quantum systems, outcomes are not fixed. They are influenced by probabilities. The more often a certain state is reinforced, the more likely it becomes. Your thinking works the same way. Repeated thoughts strengthen specific neural pathways in the brain and reinforce emotional responses in the body. Over time, these internal patterns shape how you perceive options, risks, and opportunities. This is why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different realities. It isn't the event that defines the outcome. It's the internal signal each person is broadcasting while experiencing it. When your thoughts are dominated by fear, doubt, or scarcity, your mind becomes trained to look for confirmation of those states. It doesn't mean reality is hostile. It means your awareness is tuned to a narrow frequency. Possibilities still exist, but they fall outside your range of perception. On the other hand, when thoughts shift toward clarity, self-trust, and openness, the signal changes. You start noticing different information. Different opportunities feel visible. Different responses become available. Nothing mystical happened. The signal simply became coherent. Here's the critical insight. Your thoughts are not neutral. Even the ones you dismiss as just thinking are shaping probability. They are telling your nervous system what to expect and your attention what to prioritize. This doesn't mean you must control every thought. That's impossible. But it does mean you must become aware of which thoughts you keep feeding, the ones you return to, the ones you rehearse, the ones you believe without questioning, because those are the signals that grow stronger. And over time, reality doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you consistently signal internally, quietly, and repeatedly. Once you understand this, your inner dialogue is no longer harmless. It becomes the most influential conversation you will ever have. 3. You are not stuck. You are collapsed. Feeling stuck is one of the most convincing illusions the mind creates. It feels permanent, heavy, final. But quantum physics offers a very different interpretation of what stuck actually means. At the quantum level, particles don't exist in a single state. They exist in multiple potential states at once. This is known as superposition. Only when a measurement is made does one possibility become real and the others disappear. Until then, nothing is fixed. Your life works the same way. What you call being stuck is not a lack of options. It is the repeated collapse into the same outcome, the same reactions, the same habits, the same self-definition. Over time, the mind becomes familiar with one version of reality and mistakes familiarity for truth. You tell yourself, this is just how things are. But what you really mean is, this is what I keep observing. Every day, through your choices, expectations, and emotional responses, you act as the observer of your own life, and each observation collapses possibility into experience. When the observer never changes, the outcome doesn't either. This is why insight alone isn't enough. You can understand change intellectually and still feel trapped, because understanding without changing, the observer keeps collapsing the same reality again and again. The observer is your identity in motion, how you see yourself, what you assume is possible, what you expect to fail, and what you don't even try. These assumptions act like measurements. They narrow the field before life has a chance to surprise you. But here's the turning point. Collapse can happen differently. The moment you respond instead of react, pause instead of rush, question instead of assume, you interrupt the pattern. You create space, and in that space, new possibilities exist again. You don't need to reinvent your entire life to shift it. You only need to stop observing it the same way. You are not stuck because reality has run out of options. You are stuck because the observer hasn't changed. And once the observer changes, the collapse does too. 4. Fear is a measurement that shrinks reality. Fear feels protective. It tells you it's keeping you safe, realistic, grounded. But in truth, fear functions like a measurement in quantum physics, one that collapses possibility into the smallest, safest outcome. In quantum systems, measurement limits what can appear. The moment something is measured in a narrow way, the range of possible states disappears. Fear does the same thing to the mind. When fear dominates, awareness contracts. Options feel fewer, risks feel larger, the future feels rigid and closed. This is not because the world suddenly became more dangerous. It's because fear trains the mind to look for threat instead of potential. When fear is active, the nervous system shifts into survival mode. In this state, the brain prioritizes speed over depth. It stops exploring and starts defending. Creativity drops, curiosity fades, and with them, access to new outcomes disappears. That's why fear makes life feel repetitive and exhausting, not because nothing is changing, but because you are collapsing reality into the same narrow band over and over again. You choose familiar discomfort over unfamiliar possibility. Fear also has a way of disguising itself as logic. It says, "I'm just being realistic," or "I can't afford to take risks," or "This is how it's always been." But realism, when driven by fear, is simply probability viewed through a shrinking lens. Quantum physics doesn't deny uncertainty. It shows that uncertainty is where possibility lives. The more open the system, the more outcomes remain available. Fear closes the system. This doesn't mean you eliminate fear. That's not the goal. Fear is information, not instruction. It signals that something matters. But when fear becomes the decision maker, it dictates the measurement, and the measurement defines the result. The shift happens when you notice fear without obeying it. When you feel it and still pause, still breathe, still choose deliberately. That pause widens the field again. It restores possibility. Fear shrinks reality only when it goes unquestioned. The moment you stop letting fear define the measurement, reality begins to expand again. 5. The past has no power except memory. Most people believe the past is something solid, fixed, heavy, unchangeable. They speak about it as if it is a force that follows them, shapes them, limits them. But quantum physics quietly dismantles this idea. At the deepest level of reality, time is not the straight line we experience. The past is not something that reaches forward and controls the present. It is something the mind keeps observing. In quantum theory, an event does not remain active unless it continues to be measured. Measurement is what gives information stability. Without observation, the system returns to possibility. Your past works the same way. It does not actively influence you unless you keep revisiting it, replaying it, and using it as evidence for who you think you are. Memory feels like truth because it feels familiar. But familiarity is not power, it is repetition. Every time you recall the past emotionally, you are not simply remembering it. You are reactivating the same neural pathways, the same body sensations, the same emotional chemistry. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between a present threat and a remembered one. To the body, memory is happening now. This is why old experiences can still trigger fear, shame, anger, or regret long after the situation has ended. The event is over, but the observation continues. And as long as it does, the past stays alive, not in reality, but in perception. Quantum physics introduces a radical idea. Observation influences outcome not only forward in time, but across it. This means the meaning of the past is not fixed. It is updated by how it is observed in the present. When you revisit the past with the same emotional lens, you collapse it into the same story. When the lens changes, the meaning changes too. This is where most people get trapped. They use the past as proof that they failed, proof that they can't change, proof that they're behind, broken, or unlucky. But proof only exists because the observer keeps measuring the same conclusion. The past does not define your limits, it defines your conditioning. And conditioning can be interrupted. The moment you stop using memory as identity, its power weakens. When you stop saying, "This is who I am because of what happened," and instead say, "This is what happened, but not what is happening," the system begins to loosen. The emotional charge fades, the grip relaxes, possibility returns. This doesn't mean denying the past. It means removing its authority. You are not required to relive what you have already survived. You are not obligated to keep measuring old outcomes. Healing, in many cases, is simply choosing not to observe the same story with the same emotional intensity. When the past is no longer observed as a limitation, it stops collapsing the present. And when that happens, the future is no longer forced to resemble what came before. The past has no power except memory, and memory only has power when you give it attention. 6. You attract by coherence, not by wanting. Most people believe change happens by wanting something badly enough. They focus on desire, repetition, and effort. But quantum physics points toward a deeper mechanism, coherence. Wanting alone does not create outcomes. Alignment does. In physics, coherence occurs when parts of a system move in harmony, when waves are synchronized instead of scattered. A coherent system is powerful, efficient, and stable. An incoherent system loses energy internally, even if it has strong force behind it. Your inner world works the same way. Wanting is often a signal of lack. It says, "I don't have this yet." When that wanting is mixed with doubt, impatience, or anxiety, the system becomes incoherent. Thoughts pull in one direction, emotions pull in another, and actions hesitate somewhere in between. Energy leaks, progress slows. This is why intense desire can sometimes push goals further away. Not because desire is wrong, but because it is often paired with internal conflict. You want the outcome, but you don't fully believe it's possible. You imagine success, but you emotionally rehearse failure. The system sends mixed signals. Quantum systems respond poorly to mixed signals. Coherence, on the other hand, is quiet. It doesn't beg, it doesn't rush. It happens when your thoughts, emotions, and actions agree. When you think something is possible, feel calm around it, and act naturally in its direction, the system stabilizes. Momentum builds without strain. This is why some people seem to move forward effortlessly, not because life favors them, but because they are internally aligned. Their expectations, emotions, and behavior point in the same direction. Reality responds to clarity faster than it responds to force. Coherence also changes how you perceive time. When you are aligned, waiting doesn't feel heavy. Uncertainty doesn't feel threatening. You are not constantly checking for proof because you are no longer divided inside. The outcome feels natural, not urgent. Here's the part most people miss. Coherence is not positive thinking. It's honest alignment. Pretending to believe something while feeling fear underneath is incoherence. Repeating affirmations while acting from self-doubt is incoherence. The system detects contradiction, not words. To become coherent, you don't need more motivation. You need fewer internal arguments. This means resolving emotional resistance, slowing down reactions, letting go of the need to control timing, allowing yourself to feel stable before the outcome arrives, not after. In quantum terms, coherence increases the probability of a specific state becoming real, not instantly, not magically, but consistently. The system doesn't fight itself anymore. You don't attract by wanting harder. You attract by becoming internally aligned with what you're moving toward. When coherence replaces desperation, reality starts meeting you halfway. 7. Silence is not empty. It is loaded with possibility. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. The moment things go quiet, the mind rushes in with thoughts, worries, plans, and noise. Silence feels awkward, unproductive, even threatening. But quantum physics reveals a truth that completely reverses this belief. What appears empty is often the most powerful state of all. In physics, the vacuum is not nothing. It is a field of potential energy, full of fluctuations waiting to become particles. Creation does not emerge from chaos alone. It emerges from stillness, from a space where nothing is being forced. Your mind works the same way. When your mind is constantly reacting, predicting, and narrating, it is crowded. There is no room for new insight, no space for different outcomes to appear. You may be busy thinking, but you are not available. Silence changes this. When you pause, when you stop filling every moment with interpretation, you allow the system to reset. The nervous system shifts out of defense. The brain stops rehearsing the past and controlling the future. Awareness widens. This is why clarity often arrives when you stop searching for it. In the shower, on a quiet walk, late at night when the noise fades, silence doesn't give answers by force. It creates the conditions for them to surface. Silence is also where choice returns. In a reactive state, you don't choose. You repeat. You replay habits, beliefs, and emotional reflexes. But in silence, there is a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is everything. It is where you can decide differently, where the observer steps back instead of collapsing the same outcome again. Many people avoid silence because it reveals truth. When the noise drops, uncomfortable feelings can surface, unanswered questions, unprocessed emotions. But this discomfort is not danger, it is information. And information is what allows systems to reorganize. Quantum systems require periods of low activity to stabilize. Constant measurement disrupts coherence. The same is true for you. When you are always reacting, always checking, always consuming, Your inner system never settles. Possibility remains scattered. Silence gathers it. This does not mean isolating yourself or withdrawing from life. It means learning to stop interfering with every moment, letting some moments remain unresolved, unlabeled, unforced. In silence, you are not doing nothing. You are allowing something new to form. And when the mind learns to rest in that space even briefly, it becomes receptive again. Insight sharpens, intuition strengthens, decisions feel clearer, not heavier. Silence is not absence, it is access. When you stop filling the space, reality finally has room to respond. 8. Your body listens before reality does. Most people believe change begins in the mind. They try to think differently, understand more, analyze harder. But long before reality shifts on the outside, something else responds first: the body. In every human experience, the body reacts before conscious thought finishes forming. Heart rate changes, muscles tense or relax, breathing becomes shallow or deep. These reactions happen faster than logic, faster than intention, faster than belief. This is not a flaw, it is a system. The body is a receiver. It constantly interprets signals from your environment and your inner world. In quantum terms, it functions like an interface between probability and experience. Before an outcome becomes visible in your life, it registers internally as sensation. This is why certain decisions feel heavy before you can explain why. Why some paths create tightness in the chest, while others bring a subtle sense of calm even when they seem risky. The body processes coherence and incoherence faster than the mind can label them. When the body is chronically tense, anxious, or exhausted, it sends a consistent signal of threat. In that state, perception narrows. The brain focuses on control and protection. You may intellectually want change, but your nervous system is preparing for danger. The system becomes resistant not because you're weak, but because safety hasn't been established. Quantum systems behave similarly. When a system is unstable, energy is spent maintaining balance rather than exploring new states. Nothing new emerges until stability returns. This is why regulation matters more than motivation. You cannot access expanded possibilities from a body that feels unsafe. No amount of positive thinking overrides a nervous system in survival mode. The body must first experience calm, rhythm, and grounding before the mind can open to new outcomes. Simple actions change everything. Slowing the breath, releasing tension in the jaw or shoulders, standing instead of collapsing, moving instead of freezing. These are not small acts, they are signals. When the body shifts, perception follows. When perception shifts, choices change. And when choices change consistently, reality reorganizes. Most people wait for life to improve before they relax, but the sequence is reversed. The body must experience safety first. Only then does the field of possibility widen. This is also why certain moments feel like turning points without obvious reason. A deep breath, a pause, a sudden sense of clarity. The body settles, and the mind finally has access to options that were always there but previously invisible. You don't change your life by forcing belief. You change it by teaching your body that it is safe to experience something new. The body listens before reality does. When you learn to work with it instead of against it, change stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a natural progression. 9. Attention is the most powerful currency you possess. There is something you spend every single day without noticing, and once it is spent, it never returns. Not money, not time, attention. In quantum physics, observation is not neutral. What is observed becomes defined. What is not observed remains potential. Attention determines which aspects of reality become solid and which remain unrealized. Your life reflects this law constantly. Whatever you consistently focus on grows in clarity, intensity, and importance. Problems expand when they are repeatedly examined. Fear deepens when it is constantly monitored. Opportunities strengthen when they are given space to develop. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means recognizing that attention is an amplifier. Most people live as if their attention is unlimited. They give it to worry, comparison, resentment, regret, and endless information. Then they wonder why their inner world feels crowded and heavy, but the system is simply responding to what is being fed. Attention trains perception. When you repeatedly attend to what is missing, the mind becomes skilled at detecting lack. When you attend to threat, the nervous system becomes alert, even in safe environments. When you attend to growth, learning, or possibility, those pathways strengthen. In quantum terms, repeated observation increases the probability of a particular state becoming stable. The more you observe something, the more real it becomes to you, not necessarily because it dominates reality, but because it dominates awareness. This is why constant exposure to noise drains clarity. Endless scrolling, reacting, and consuming fragment attention. The observer becomes scattered. When attention is divided, coherence breaks down. Energy leaks. And without coherence, even the best opportunities go unnoticed. Attention is also what gives meaning. Two people can experience the same moment, but what they attend to determines what they take away. One notices limitation, the other notices possibility. Reality did not change, attention did. This means you are always investing, whether you realize it or not. Every time you return to a thought, you reinforce it. Every time you emotionally rehearse a fear, you give it more structure. Every time you dwell on a problem without moving toward resolution, you stabilize it. But attention can also be withdrawn. When you stop feeding what drains you, it weakens. When you redirect focus toward what stabilizes you, it grows. This is not denial, it is allocation. The most powerful shift happens when you become intentional with attention, not forcing positivity, not suppressing discomfort, but choosing where to linger. Because attention doesn't just follow reality, it shapes which version of reality you experience. Once you understand this, attention becomes sacred. You stop wasting it on what cannot grow you. You stop lending it to narratives that keep you small. Your attention is your most valuable currency. Spend it wisely, and reality reorganizes around that choice. 10. Confusion is not failure, it is a signal of reorganization. Confusion is one of the most misunderstood experiences a human being can have. Most people panic the moment clarity disappears. They rush to fix it, label it, or escape it. They assume something has gone wrong. But quantum physics tells a very different story. Confusion often appears just before a system reorganizes into a more complex and stable form. In physics, systems do not move smoothly from one order to another. Before a new structure forms, the old one must lose stability. Patterns that once worked begin to fail. Signals become noisy. Outcomes feel unpredictable. This phase is not breakdown, it is transition. Your mind works the same way. When beliefs that once gave you certainty start to crack, confusion enters. When old goals no longer motivate you, but new ones aren't clear yet, confusion deepens. When the identity you've lived by starts to feel uncomfortable, confusion grows louder. This is not because you are lost. It's because the old framework can no longer contain what you are becoming. The mind hates this stage because it cannot categorize it. It feels like standing between worlds, no longer who you were, not yet who you will be. The instinct is to retreat to familiarity, even if it no longer fits. But retreating only delays the reorganization that is already underway. Quantum systems behave the same way when pushed beyond a threshold. Before a new pattern emerges, fluctuations increase. The system appears unstable. But beneath that instability, something important is happening. Information is being redistributed. New connections are forming. Old structures are dissolving. Confusion is the human experience of that redistribution. This is why trying to force clarity too early often backfires. When you demand answers before the system is ready, you collapse it into the nearest familiar pattern. You settle for certainty over accuracy. You choose comfort over truth. Growth requires tolerance for ambiguity. During this phase, the most powerful move is not decision, it is presence. Staying with the uncertainty without panicking. Allowing questions to exist without rushing them toward conclusions. This patience gives the system time to reorganize properly. Confusion also strips away false confidence. It reveals what you were holding onto out of habit rather than alignment. Old explanations stop working. Old motivations feel hollow. This discomfort is not a sign to go backward. It is a sign that your internal map is being redrawn. Many people misinterpret this stage and assume they are failing. They think they've lost direction, discipline, or purpose. In reality, they are between versions. The observer is shifting, and the old measurements no longer apply. This is also why confusion often feels lonely. When you are reorganizing, you don't fit neatly into old categories, and you can't yet explain the new ones. Language lags behind experience. Others may not understand what you're going through because you don't fully understand it yourself. That doesn't mean you're wrong, it means you're early. Quantum theory reminds us that order does not disappear, it transforms. But transformation requires letting go of precise control. It requires allowing the system to find a new balance, rather than forcing the old one to hold. If you are feeling confused right now, resist the urge to label it as failure. Instead, ask a different question. What structure is no longer working? What beliefs feel too small? What explanations feel outdated? Confusion points directly to the edge of growth. The more you can stay steady in this phase without numbing, distracting, or collapsing into fear, the cleaner the reorganization becomes. Insight arrives not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet settling. Pieces begin to fit again, but differently. And when clarity returns, it doesn't feel like going back. It feels like arriving. Confusion is not the end of understanding. It is the doorway to a deeper one. 11. You don't need more information. You need integration. At some point, learning stops helping. Most people don't realize when they've crossed that point. They assume confusion means they need more answers, more books, more videos, more explanations. So they keep consuming, keep searching, keep collecting ideas. And yet, nothing truly changes. Not because the information is wrong, but because information alone does not transform reality. Quantum physics makes a sharp distinction between data and state. A system can hold enormous amounts of information and still remain unchanged if that information is not integrated into how the system behaves. Knowledge without embodiment is inert. Your mind works the same way. You may understand why something isn't working in your life. You may clearly see patterns, habits, and limitations, but understanding does not equal integration. Integration happens only when insight alters perception, behavior, and response, not just thought. This is why people can explain their problems perfectly and still repeat them. Information lives in the intellect. Integration lives in the nervous system. When something is integrated, it changes how you react without effort. You don't have to remember it. You don't have to apply it consciously. It becomes part of how you move through the world. The system updates automatically. Quantum systems shift states not when they accumulate more data, but when conditions change. Temperature, pressure, coherence. These factors reorganize the system at a fundamental level. Human change works the same way. You don't need more concepts. You need a shift in state. This is also why constant learning can become a form of avoidance. It feels productive, but it delays action. As long as you're still learning, you don't have to confront the discomfort of living differently. Knowledge becomes a buffer against transformation. Integration, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It requires slowing down, sitting with insight long enough for it to sink below thought, allowing it to affect your posture, your tone, your timing, your boundaries. Letting it change how you say yes, how you say no, how you pause before reacting. This is where real change happens quietly. Integration also demands honesty. You cannot integrate what you only half believe. If part of you clings to the old identity, the system remains divided. Divided systems are inefficient. They leak energy. They stall. Quantum coherence returns only when contradiction is resolved. This is why repetition matters not of information, but of experience. Living an insight repeatedly is what embeds it. Each time you respond differently, the new pattern strengthens. Eventually, the old one weakens without effort. At that point, change feels natural instead of forced. Many people mistake inspiration for integration. They feel moved, excited, awakened, and then return to old behavior the next day. Inspiration is a spark. Integration is a restructuring. You don't need to be inspired again. You need to allow what you already know to change how you live. When integration happens, reality responds differently. Not magically, not instantly, but consistently, because the observer has changed at the level that actually matters. So, if you feel like you already know a lot but nothing has shifted, don't seek more answers. Pause. Slow down. Live one insight fully. That is where information becomes transformation. And that is where the system finally updates. 12. This message is a checkpoint, not an accident. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves loudly. They don't arrive with dramatic events or obvious turning points. They come quietly, almost unnoticed, and yet they carry more weight than most decisions we ever make. This is one of those moments. Quantum physics tells us that systems don't change continuously. They change at thresholds. There are points where enough conditions align that the system cannot remain the same. At that point, even the smallest input can redirect everything. This message is not the cause of change. It is the signal that change is already possible. Out of all the directions your attention could have gone, it landed here. Not because this video is special in isolation, but because your awareness is at a boundary. Old patterns have been questioned. Old explanations have weakened. Something in you has been preparing for a shift, even if you couldn't name it. Checkpoints work like this. They don't force movement, but they ask for recognition. You can ignore them and continue forward unchanged. Or you can pause and recalibrate. Both are choices, but only one is conscious. Most people wait for certainty before they act. They want proof, reassurance, guarantees. But quantum reality doesn't work that way. Action often precedes certainty. The system responds once the observer commits not to an outcome, but to a direction. This is why moments like this feel subtle yet significant. You may not know what's next. You may not feel ready, but readiness is not the requirement. Awareness is. A checkpoint asks a simple question. Are you paying attention? It invites you to stop running on autopilot, to notice how you've been thinking, reacting, choosing, to recognize what no longer fits and what you've been tolerating out of habit rather than alignment. This does not mean you must change everything. Most transformation begins with one quiet adjustment, a pause before reacting, a boundary you finally honor, a choice you stop postponing. These small shifts alter the observer, and when the observer changes, the entire system responds. Quantum physics shows that once a system crosses a threshold, returning to the previous state becomes unlikely. Awareness is one such threshold. Once you see clearly, you cannot fully go back to unconscious repetition. This is why ignoring a checkpoint often creates discomfort. The system senses misalignment, tension builds, confusion grows, not as punishment, but as feedback. This message is not here to tell you what to do. It is here to remind you that you are not asleep, that something in you is awake enough to question, to reflect, to pause, and that is enough to begin. If nothing else changes after this moment, remember this: you noticed, you listened, you allowed yourself to be still long enough to hear something beneath the noise. That alone shifts probability. This was not an accident. It was a checkpoint. What you do next doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be intentional. And that intention, quiet, honest, and conscious, is where the next version of your life begins. Before you leave, take one breath. Not to remember what was said, but to notice what changed. You didn't come here for information. You came here for awareness. And awareness, once it arrives, doesn't demand action. It invites honesty. You don't need to figure everything out tonight. You don't need a perfect plan. Just don't ignore what you felt while listening. Because moments like this don't shout. They whisper. And the people who hear them are the ones who are ready. If this message reached you, let it be enough for now. Carry the stillness with you. Notice what you observe differently tomorrow. This wasn't random, and neither are you. I'll see you when the next signal finds you.